CEO fired the single mother for being late every Friday until her father whispered, "She found me again." The whole office went quiet as Naomi Reyes pushed through the glass doors at 8:22 in the morning, out of breath, her son's lunchbox still clutched in one hand. She already knew what was waiting for her. Standing near the elevators was CEO Diane Calloway, holding a printed attendance report. Diane didn't ask a single question. She looked at Naomi and said this was the last time she could let it slide. 4 years of steady, careful work disappeared in one sentence. Naomi was let go for being late on Fridays. What Diane didn't know was that those missing minutes had been spent keeping someone alive. By the next night, her own father would look at that same woman and whisper 3 words that would leave a powerful CEO standing speechless in the rain. She found me again. If you believe people deserve to be understood before they're judged, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to Beyond Kindness because stories like this one are exactly why this channel exists. Naomi Reyes never imagined her life would look like this. 2 years earlier, her husband Marcus had been killed in a workplace accident, leaving her alone to raise their 7-year-old son, Eli. Since then, every single day had felt like a race against the clock. She woke before dawn, made breakfast, packed Eli's backpack, double-knotted his shoelaces because he hadn't learned yet, and got him smiling before the school bus arrived. There was no backup plan, no second income, no one to call when things went wrong. She carried all of it herself, and she never once complained about the weight of it. What nobody at Calloway Furnishings knew was that Naomi had quietly become something like a guardian for the older residents on her street. If someone's trash cans needed pulling in, she pulled them in. If a porch light burned out and nobody could reach it, she found a ladder. If an elderly neighbor seemed unsteady walking to the mailbox, she walked beside them, slow and patient, until they were safely back inside. She believed kindness wasn't something you talked about. It was something you simply did, quietly, without an audience. The problem was that these moments kept happening on Friday mornings, right when she needed to be walking through the office doors on time. Diane Calloway only ever saw the numbers on a printed report. And as CEO of one of the fastest-growing furniture companies in the state, she had built her entire reputation on discipline. No exceptions for anyone, ever. To her, being late meant disrespecting the people who managed to show up exactly when they were supposed to. She had already given Naomi 2 written warnings. She never once asked why the lateness kept happening. She simply assumed carelessness and moved on with her morning. That final Friday started the way most of them did. Naomi had just dropped Eli at school when she noticed an older man standing frozen at a busy crosswalk, a few blocks from her route. He looked lost, anxious, gripping a folded newspaper like it was the only thing keeping him steady. Cars rushed past him on both sides. People walked around him like he wasn't there at all. Naomi pulled over immediately, afraid he might step into traffic without realizing it. The man couldn't remember his street name. He kept repeating the same phrase, getting more frightened with each repetition. Naomi walked beside him calmly, talking softly, asking gentle questions until 2 blocks later, he stopped in front of a brick house with a yellow door and said, "That one. That's the one." A home health aide opened the door, relieved, and thanked Naomi for bringing him back safely. By the time Naomi reached Calloway Furnishings, she was 22 minutes late. Diane didn't ask where she'd been. She simply handed her the termination paperwork, already prepared and waiting. Naomi packed up her desk quietly, a small photo of Eli, a chipped mug Marcus had given her the year they got married. A few coworkers wanted to speak up on her behalf, but nobody wanted to challenge Diane directly. Naomi walked out of the building that afternoon, believing it was the last time she'd ever see it from the inside. That evening, while scrolling job listings on her phone, Naomi watched a moving truck pull away from a small rental house 2 streets over, one she had leased weeks earlier, hoping for a quieter neighborhood for Eli. She had no idea the large house directly behind hers, separated only by a low fence, belonged to Diane Calloway and her aging father. And she certainly had no idea that the man she'd guided home that morning was Diane's father. The next morning, Naomi stood on her new porch and watched Eli's bus disappear down the road, holding her smile until he was out of sight. The moment he was gone, the weight of everything settled back onto her shoulders. No job, a few weeks of savings, no clear plan for what came after that. Still, instead of sitting with the fear, she pulled out a screwdriver and started fixing the loose porch railing. Working with her hands had always quieted her mind. On the other side of the fence, Walter Calloway stood at his kitchen window, watching the new neighbor work. Something about her had stayed with him since the day before. His memory wasn't what it used to be, the doctors called it early-stage decline, But every time he saw this woman, something in his chest settled, even if he couldn't explain why. That afternoon, Diane came home earlier than usual after a difficult board meeting and noticed her father outside near the fence, smiling as Naomi helped a neighborhood boy fix a flat bike tire, refusing the dollar he tried to hand her afterward. Diane watched from a distance and admitted, privately, that the woman seemed genuinely kind. But kindness to her still didn't excuse repeated lateness. Discipline mattered more. That had always been her rule. As evening came, dark clouds rolled in fast, bringing heavy rain and sharp wind. Around dinner time, Walter wandered out through the side gate while Diane was upstairs on an urgent call. His memory slipped more easily in moments of stress, and he'd done this before, though never in weather like this. Nearly 25 minutes later, Diane noticed he was missing. Panic took over instantly. She searched every room, then ran into the street, calling his name into the rain, neighbors stepping out to help as thunder rolled overhead. Then through the downpour, she saw two figures moving slowly up the sidewalk. It was Naomi, one arm holding an umbrella over Walter, the other steadying him as they crossed the slick pavement together. Walter looked shaken but safe. Naomi had found him sitting alone at a bus stop 3 blocks away, soaked and disoriented, and hadn't hesitated for a second. Diane rushed forward, flooded with relief. Before she could say a word, Walter reached for his daughter's arm, his eyes filling with tears, and looked directly at Naomi. "She found me again," he whispered. Diane went completely still. Walter explained slowly that this was the same woman who had walked him home the morning before, the one who'd stayed beside him patiently until he felt safe. And now, less than 24 hours later, she had found him again, in the rain, without expecting anything in return. Diane suddenly remembered firing Naomi only hours after that very first act of kindness. The attendance report that had felt so important 24 hours earlier suddenly felt almost meaningless in her hands. For the first time in years, she wondered how many other stories were hiding behind the numbers she judged so quickly every single morning. She looked at Naomi differently now, not as the employee who was always a few minutes late, but as a mother quietly carrying weight no one at the office had ever bothered to ask about. Diane noticed, too, that Naomi's jacket was completely soaked through, wrapped around Walter's shoulders to keep him warm, while she herself stood shivering and said nothing about it. That night, Diane couldn't sleep. She replayed every single Friday in her head, every clipped conversation, every warning she'd issued without asking a single follow-up question. She pulled Naomi's personnel file from the system. Her performance reviews were nearly flawless. Every supervisor's note said the same thing in different words. Reliable, honest, the first to help anyone who needed it. For years, Diane had focused entirely on the one flaw she could measure on a spreadsheet and had completely missed the character that no spreadsheet could ever capture. For the first time since becoming CEO, Diane understood that leadership wasn't only about enforcing rules without exception. Sometimes it meant understanding the person standing behind the rule that got broken. The next morning, before the sun was even fully up, Diane drove to the small rental house behind her own. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't arriving as a CEO. She was arriving as someone who owed an apology. She found Naomi kneeling beside the porch, watering a small row of marigolds Eli had planted along the railing. The little house held nothing extravagant, but it held something Diane hadn't expected to feel standing in front of it. It felt like a home built carefully, out of love rather than money. Diane apologized plainly. She admitted she had judged Naomi's lateness without ever once asking what was behind it, and that the assumption had cost her the chance to know someone who deserved far better from her. She offered Naomi her position back, along with a promotion to operations coordinator, a flexible schedule built around school drop-off and pickup, and a raise that meant Naomi could stop calculating every single grocery trip down to the dollar. Naomi stood quietly for a long moment before answering, not because she needed convincing about the job, because she was deciding whether she believed Diane had actually changed or was simply trying to undo a mistake quickly and quietly. "I'll come back," Naomi finally said, "but only if Friday mornings stay exactly how they need to be. If someone needs help, I'm going to help them. That part doesn't change." Diane didn't hesitate. "It shouldn't have to," she said. "I'm sorry it took almost losing my father to understand that." Naomi went back to work the following Monday, and something in that office shifted slowly over the following months. Diane started asking why before she ever started writing anyone up. She quietly changed the attendance policy company-wide, adding language that allowed flexibility for caregiving and emergencies, something no one had ever bothered putting into writing before. Employees noticed. They started talking, quietly at first, about how the company finally felt like it saw people instead of just their timestamps. Walter and Naomi's son Eli became close over that following year. In the easy way children and grandparent-aged neighbors sometimes do, Walter taught him how to whistle properly, the kind of skill that takes patient repetition. And Eli started checking on him most afternoons after school, just to talk about nothing in particular. Naomi never asked him to. He simply wanted to. Diane kept a small printed copy of Naomi's old attendance report in her desk drawer for years afterward, not as a punishment and not as a trophy. As a reminder, she said once, of exactly how easily a person can mistake a number for the whole truth. If this story reminded you that people are always carrying more than what shows up on a report or a calendar, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Share this with someone who needs to hear that kindness is worth a second look before judgment. And if stories like this matter to you, subscribe to Beyond Kindness, because there's always another one waiting to be told.